So I get a lot of questions as to why I'm not using PeerRef, and I'm actually always using PeerRef. Like PeerRef's always off on the side, and I'm using it to stack images and manage them. However, whenever it comes to videos, I tend to split the view and turn it into a UV image editor because it's just a lot easier. And then from there, I just drag my image over, and then we're ready to party. So in lieu of letting Blender have my whole screen, I'm just going to use a screenshot of my PeerRef, and from here we can begin today's discussion. So today we're going to be talking about this soap dispenser, and I was originally going to do a practice on this as well, but I figured, why not just continue in this thread of doing a raw take without even doing a practice, just to show you guys just kind of that organic brainstorming process that happens. So in the course of getting screenshots, I accidentally grabbed some pictures of this tricky Honda one as well, but it almost looks exactly the same. But I've just been looking at this image for like the last couple of days, just kind of thinking about how I'd go about getting these forms, because I've been talking about what's the hardest parts of this thing, and really this part is really interesting. Like, the more I look at it, the more I'm like, oh my god, what part is that, and what are these shapes? I mean, I don't know how accurate I have to be. However, sometimes I over obsess and try to go for the absolute thing I see in images. So that is why I just need to not have images in my life. But without further ado, let's begin. So over the course of these videos, I've tried to show different strategies for how I use sub-D, whether I attempt to dominate it using hardcore geometric solutions, solving the first two levels of it, or if I'm trying to just let sub-D have its way with the geometry. So let's delete this cube. And I also need to turn on keystrokes to be displayed. So now that we have keystrokes, I'm going to Shift A, add a plane, and we're just going to try this the way that I kind of envisioned in my head. I always talk about this mental blender that I'm always kind of playing with whenever I'm not actually using Blender. So I'm going to Alt-D in order to extrude this without creating an additional edge. Alternatively, I would press E and it would get something like that, or I would press E and get something like that. Sometimes you just want to extend, so I just press Alt-D. But it matters where your mouse cursor is. So it's a really interesting technique. It's really old school, but you should integrate it in your life whenever it comes to expanding on geometry. But it's also kind of one of those foundational things, I think, whenever it comes to like in-gon modeling. So we're going to jump into K and just, as I look at this image, my interpretation is just being redrawn in my head. It's terrible. We are going to press Alt-X, but I'm going to press D and change my pivot point to cursor. And then from here we can mirror, and we have this empty that we can just deal with on the fly, and we can just move this object freely, and we're just kind of free modeling versus my typical solution, which is I already know I could bull my way to success, and we have done so much of that to the point that people might be wondering if I'm out of strategies, but really that's just one way. There is always the traditional sub-D way, which is where you model your model very efficiently, and by dealing with the density of geometric convergence, you're able to let sub-D basically do its job. So that was something I tried to demonstrate in those cylinder merging studies, where we would merge the cylinders and those would go in different directions. So this area was really the area that I was looking at. I was like, oh man. In fact, I'm really thinking about this, and I'm looking at the mesh, but I'm thinking about the sub-D cage. So, you're probably looking at this thinking, man, he probably could use Boxcutter, use some inset, but I want to get this mesh in its form. And this thing isn't actually even mirrored. Maybe it's kind of mirrored. In some of these images it looks mirrored, but it definitely deviates whenever we start getting to the soap dispenser. Like, when it came to getting these images, I ended up getting down to people selling it on eBay. Obviously, I'm pretty sure that's like a reference image thing. Like, you end up starting on Google, and the next thing you know, you're looking on eBay. So, when I talk about letting sub-D have its way, I'm talking about basically whenever we smooth it, all of our straight edges will be turned into arcs. And then depending on the density that we have with our corners, you know, for example, we now have this vert here and this vert here, which means that whenever this arcs, it's only going to basically arc so far, versus if this wasn't there, it would arc entirely, which is an undesired result. So that's the kind of mindset I'm trying to go in this with, at least for this particular demonstration. So let's press F, and then I'm going to press I, but I'm going to press B in order to keep the boundary. And like I said, we're going at this like what I would consider, you know, sub D classic. Nothing too newfangled just yet. We're going to turn on vertex snapping, vertimergy in the house, and we are just working our way through. So this area, instead of being all precise with it, we're just going to be imprecise. Like I say in all my previous videos, you know, I just manhandle this geometry. Sometimes you could be getting fun with offset edges and being fancy, you know, if you wanted like a really high level of precision, but everything is a cage mesh to me right now, at least the way I see it in my head. So that means we only have to move like one edge and sub D will be like okie dokie. So this area at the top is also kind of a nuisance, and you know, I probably could have gotten a flat view and started modeling like with this into view. Me just kind of free modeling based on ref rather than strictly adhering to it isn't like an artistic thing or anything. It's just, I'm just being weird. But, and also once we start adhering to it in the 3D view, it starts to get a lot more boring and starts to feel more like work, which is definitely not the goal with content on the channel. Yeah, I do enough of that on the side as it is, and turning people down all the time. It's terrible. So let's extrude this down. We'll press SZ and bring this down to vertimerge snap. And so let's extrude this up, just, you know, real basic. Let's take this, also extrude it out. Still very basic, and this looks nothing like the image. So this is also lattices. You know, I look at this, I'm like, man, lattice, but it isn't lattice time yet. Lattice is like Miller time for 3D artists. You know, sometimes you just need a Miller. So this plane that we have is such a unusual plane, and so I really wanted to, this is one of the reasons I wanted to practice it, was because the plane itself that occurs here is just, I don't know, a study of itself, I feel. Dang, we look at how this thing transitions with the actual surface up top. This means that, you know, we need to have this be a little bit smoother in how it interacts. So, you know, right now sub D would just kind of arc this all the way up, but we actually need this to arc in a way that's kind of perpendicular. So I feel like more than likely as we continue modeling it, it's going to require more and more geometry for us to force sub D to our will. I mean, that's like my only solution with sub D. I don't know how other people do it. They probably solve it with topology. Like I always say, I'm not a topology expert. I'm just more of a topology connoisseur, like a collector of topology. So just looking at it, really analyzing this plane, why don't we have it? We probably don't have it because this area isn't rounded, which then begins to create that plane, is what I'm thinking. So that is probably as close to it as I'm going to be able to get at this particular moment. So now we got to think about this area. So this area has like kind of a collisional transition with this surface, and this is one of those things that just sucks to do on a modeling level, which is why we're going to do it. So I'm just bringing this edge up and merging it like as if that's just the style, but really dangerous things are afoot. And really when it comes to being bevel and subdivision, I'm thinking in my head, I'm saying, all right, I need to lay down rules. What are those rules? all right, bevels only, you know, like it's like poker, Joker's Wild or something, you know. Instead of this time, it's like bevels 3. We're just keeping it bevels 3 right now, and that way we can hopefully keep this geometry under control. But I'm just looking at it, just seeing how distorted things are getting and pondering the most efficient topological solution for getting us out of here alive, which I feel is that simplification is always going to be like my first go-to, and then complexifying it is my second go. It's an escalation, really, you know. First I try negotiation and then subjugation. That's the only 2 ways I've been able to survive with the subdivision modifier without wanting to delete it from my builds of Blender. Just kidding, but I wouldn't do that. That would be insanity. But the subdivision modifier, I'm telling you, is a cruel mistress. So what does the other side of this thing look like? We may never know what this thing looks like on the other side. I mean, maybe this is the other side, but this feels like it's that side. So I'm going to bring over Pure Ref for just a moment, where I have all these images up. And there's probably even more images. I mean, the only answer for insufficient ref is more ref, but there's different areas that I'm looking at. Like, I probably should have actually came in and done the engine, but you know what my answer is about to be? Mirror it, let God sort out the rest. But I know that's not the answer. I should probably pause and find some references of the back, just so we can have additional fun today. That's the only goal. I mean, obviously I'm going to probably finish this pressure washer because it's just fun. And really, as we drill through the hardest pieces, it only leaves us just the pieces, and after that, you know, the project's over. So might as well finish the pressure washer. Everyone seems to be enjoying it. Even though the big moral story was, if you don't get your 3D skills together, you're going to be using a pressure washer for a living. And it may not even be as attractive as this. You'll probably be using just some terrible one that's all icky, covered with the germs of the last person who didn't pan out. So instead of that whole speech, we're just going to continue working. So here's our shape so far. We're going to call this, let's see, Topostudy Soap Bin. I know, terrible name, but all I can see is just soap between all these images. So let's look at this from the top, and we see that we have an interior termination happening at the bottom, and we don't have that on ours. I mean, all these terms that I use are just made up by me. There's probably other terms that are better, but I'm not using them because, you know, I'm just in this I'm just in this late night modeling, going insane on my own. But I'm sure there's terms for these, so let's work on this area, bringing it in, and from here let us just press K, knife, and we're not doing too bad on time. I'm looking at the clock, we're like 12 minutes, and you know, I for sure thought this thing was going to be a total pain and a scare fest. Like, yeah, I've been looking at it seriously and was like, man, I don't know if I could do this. I mean, I don't look at something and think, you know, I'm gonna give up on the whole project because of it. You know, my first thought is I'm going to ask for help somewhere. I'm going to ask someone who knows more than me about this, barring those who would give me a speech about how the entire device works. So we're just looking at the picture. However, let me show you what picture I'm looking at. I'm looking at this picture. So just so y'all can see what picture I'm looking at. However, I also have it off on the side. That's why I don't use pure ref in videos, is because I would just be looking at ref and y'all wouldn't be able to see what ref it is. So the only time I need to do that is probably when I'm creating stuff. So I'm just debating on if we should round this out early like so. Just really start hard modeling some of these bevels in that we're going to want to preserve. Is this area truly preserved sufficiently? Let's save our file, because we don't want any crashes when we use polygon debug, which sometimes can get a little weird, but for the most part is pretty good. So let us grab this, press F. But like I said, we just don't want any weirdness, and the ultimate weirdness is losing your file. You know, that's probably one of the few things in life that will truly make me angry. Like if I was driving and the car was like, hey, you just lost your Blender file at home, I would be driving impaired. I would be mad. But, you know, that's why we don't have cars telling us about the state of our Blender files. So I'm debating on if I should add loops here in order to make this connection happen, but it's obvious. And the only reason we're even making it all quads is just, we're just being random. You know, sometimes I'm all quads. Most of the time my strategy is surviving subdivision. So there's a couple of different strategies that we're already talking about here. You know, some people ask me about, can I do a video on different strategies? I mean, really, it's all foretold already throughout this content. Just being able to list a bunch of disciplines told by a crazy guy, modeling without using his ref in the viewport, won't help you. Keep telling you guys, don't waste your time watching me. Get in there and practice. My goal this month was to just get familiar with a little all quad modeling and sub D, you know, after a long time away, because like I said at the beginning, there'd be some misconceptions. I don't want people to think that there's any reason to ever cut out any aspect of any tool out of your workflow. Blender is not feature complete. So you saying I'm not going to model in this style or this style is just nonsense, because at the end of the day you need everything you can get. I mean, unless you're a brilliant artist and you already know better, in which case carry on. Also, why are you watching this video? Get out of here. But other than that, with all these tries, I don't care. We're not going for perfection. This isn't Tetris. So I'm going to save the file and let's just jump it up to subdivision, and we see that it kind of worked, except let's start creasing some edges. You know, like I said, we're just being random. I'm almost in a exploratory type phase whenever it comes to the approach this round, because I've been meaning to do videos where I talk about how I approach sharpness in terms of subdivision, with just being very dominating, because, you know, it's not always reinforcement loops. Most of the time it's reinforcement loops, because reinforcement loops in topology just will get you a much better result every single time, or at least more times than you will dealing with topology, unless you're some sort of crazy expert. But I'm just not. I'm just realizing that the less I try to tell sub D stuff, the better it listens sometimes. Or if I tell sub D everything, it has no choice but to recite what I just told it. So just two different ways of approaching sub D, but I don't think that's in a manual or nothing. Just how I view it. But, you know, you shouldn't listen to me. I'm also a guy who just hates multi-res. Like, I don't play around with it. I know what you're saying. But multi-res is so good. I know. I hear it a lot, man. Just don't mess with it. You know, bloats the blend file too much. Just don't mess around with that. I'm a weirdo. Like, when I give people files, I need them to be a certain size. But, you know, I always make fun of people whenever they, like, give me really big OBJs. Like, I'm like, yo, man, let me get that OBJ. Get an OBJ. It's like 500 megabytes. Like, Jesus, what? You pack the textures in an OBJ? Like, what's going on here? And then you open an OBJ, and, you know, the thing takes forever to pop up. So I'm almost, as I'm adding these reinforcement loops and looking at it and telling you all this nonsense, I'm just pondering in my head on the side, like, I wonder if I could survive one level of subdivision apply and then jump back into the mod. But really, we are going to need to probably try a couple of different strategies here. Also this thing has this like corner hit, which is bigger on this side, but I think it's because I'm judging the one from Honda, but I also see it on this side as well, where this side like possibly has a different type of flatness. So really just an interesting piece. Like, I'm almost tempted. I would not have a use for this thing if it was here. Look, it's not even here, or maybe it is here, but because of the factory studio lights, it's just not apparent. So it's just a conundrum. I mean, when I look at this picture, I see something that's a little bit wider on the base, but the side pieces are just a little bit thinner. So I'm just making scale accommodations just as I'm looking at it, just really going by eye on this, listening to my heart. So let's actually begin uncreasing some edges. I'm going to uncrease this area, and we're just looking at what that would have been just with raw subdivision. In fact, let's uncrease it completely, so that way we can try to resolve this with just general subdivision. So I'm just thinking off the top of my head right now. Keep that in mind. Shift D. Let's select the secondary one and hide it just in case we make a mistake. Save our file, and I feel like this area is highly important, so let's inset it. This area is highly important. Let's inset it. Let us grab these two pieces and press J to form a connection. And from here, we can also, getting distracted by my phone. It shouldn't even be within eye shot. We'll grab these as well. Just being experimental here. We can always go back to our mesh we just duplicated and hit it. J and remove, and we're just looking at what our transition looks like in connection with what the image is. And so, when I tell you that I will spend some time topologically studying something, like this is what I'm talking about. Like, I will get in and just delicately manage topology and try to just test combinations, not for practical purposes, but because I am a weirdo. Like, I will just try to be a computer, contemplate what it's like being a computer, immortality, being connected to the internet all the time. There's probably a lot of friends online. Your AOL buddy list is always full when you're a online AI. But something like that, to just imagine what the secondary second level solution would be. And then obviously we would need to baby these loops and really get this solution refined to a fine level. So like I said, this kind of stuff is really unnecessary to have to do in life. But if you're trying to understand topology, it could be assistive. Just saying. Like, I'm purely saying this as a topological connoisseur. Also, I should have put a bottle of water on this desk. Let's select it here, and we're just going to bevel, spacing this out. And because Verde Merge's on, the party's always on. And we're just adding this loop on the side. Just a lot of confidence loops. Like, I fail to overstate the destructiveness of such a thing. Like, I mean, the cool part is whenever you're adding all these loops, you can use like Mesh Machine to just dissolve a sub-D edge flow on the fly if you don't feel like dealing with it manually, which, like I said, Sub D, I don't think Mesh Machine pitches itself as a sub D tool, but I definitely admire its capabilities with it. I mean, I just imagine that as he tested it, he ran into some very odd edge cases and was like, yeah, I might as well solve them. And I mean, it happens with me. Every now and then this area needs to come out more. Like, I feel like he has a bigger wedge than me, and I'm totally jealous. Alright, so they try to tell you that wedge size doesn't matter. They're lying to you. And so because of our commitment, moving this is going to be a pain. You know, when it comes to sub D modeling, any sort of edits is a pain. That's why if you were working for a client and they're like, hey man, I need some edits. What? No, I'm kidding. But seriously, like, no one's going to want to make edits on such a mesh because it's a nightmare. Like, this mesh is exponentially becoming a nightmare with every additional edge that's being added. So the balancing act of it is this connected or what? I feel like it's not connected. It looks not connected. Let's just bring this in, and we'll still fix that area. Like I said, we're not going to let them have a bigger wedge than us. That's just not right. But really just judging the creases that are happening. And while I'm working, I'm also watching someone on Twitch, so try not to be distracted by them jumping around. And you know, each image tells a different lie or a different story depending on how you look at it. But I feel like each image has a piece of real information and a piece of false information. I don't know. That's the only way I can explain it. You look at it and there's something very real, and then because of perspective, there's also something very skewed and very distorted and also not true. So I play a different mental game with images called Who's the Liar? It's like, which one of you images is lying to me and which part is lying to me? You know, spoiler alert, it's always near the edge of the frame, but we're just continuing on with this piece of doom. Like, I was just looking at it, I was like, man, you know, that piece is probably harder than the other pieces I was looking at. Like, I modeled I guess the engine, and you know, I plan on doing a video of the pieces that I've been practicing on as well. Like I said, I always try to give these things a few dry runs just to make sure that I'm not about to go out here and just completely look silly. Like, I probably should have focus tested the nut content, but what can I say? I was overzealous with this whole event and continuing on. It's like, yeah, let me just get a nut out there. That sounds terrible, but yeah, let me just get a nut out there and knock that out as part of the criteria of things I have to do. We'll move on. So I made it just a little bit bigger. As you saw, the edit was just not that bad at all. You would think making such a move would be terrible, but the 3D cursor is like your finger, and even though I didn't use it in that case, it's definitely there for you. So just looking at this area, which has this that goes all the way around that connects to this, so really this loop should be further away in order to round this out more, giving us something like that. So let's see what we're able to do with it. Let's slide this loop at this loop. And I can see it already kind of beginning to go off the rails. So that is life as well. However, this form is just a curiosity. I'm pretty sure someone's going to reply to this video with the absolute solution, just blowing mine out of the water. However, you know, these blind runs are kind of a insight as well into my process, because like I said, my I was about to say my specialty, but my hobby is you know, modeling efficiency. Like, how can it be done efficiently? So, you know, sometimes people are like, hey, you do the same things over and over. I'm like, yeah, it's just not there yet, is it? Like, how do you get better? You practice. But like, I tend to jump around between a series of like test subjects that I've deemed to be like worthy of a study. So, you know, over the course of this adventure, I see a lot of parts that are probably going to be getting a revisit. Just looking at this part, like, what the heck shapes are these? Like, what machine? No, I'm kidding. If I start saying what machines made these, I will get so many comments talking to me about the injection molding process, and please don't do that. I have had so much experience with injection molding. Like, those stupid jobs I joke about, like, that you're going to be working if you don't get your 3D-ish together. I was there. You know, I used to have this job where I pushed buttons and just, it would mash two molds together and make a fiberglass pipe. It was like, that was probably one of the lowest points of my life, when you're just pushing buttons for a living. I mean, if I'm going to be pushing buttons, at least let me push buttons for a good reason. 3D's a little, I was just, you know, the irony hit me for a second. You know, pushing buttons for a living as I'm pushing buttons for a living. Just kidding. But computer buttons are a little bit different than just making fiberglass pipe. One day I was late from lunch, and someone just overzealously was like, I'll take his spot. And so because I was late from lunch, his finger got smashed. He just like lost a finger that day. Like, I'm not like bragging to say like how I avoided danger, but you know, I would definitely be a different Blender artist today if I lost a portion of my finger. And it was just that close, because the guy was like well known for not listening to the partner at the other side of the line. So I was of the attitude, y'all guys are being too mean to him, that's messed up, I'm gonna work with them. You know, I had a Naruto type of attitude. Spoiler alert, do not have a Naruto type of attitude. You will get Sasuke'd. So, just don't. You won't get Sakura-chan. No, I'm just kidding. You find your Sakura-chan and you lock her down. I was about to say you don't get Sakura-chan. I'm actually with a girl that I'm quite pleased with. That's why we've been together so long. But also, I'm not a big fan of change. I'm not like a dating scene type of guy. Like a guy who finds someone who won't kill me in my sleep, and you know, he'll just hang in there. Weirdo. So we need to carry this loop around to the other side, which things start to get a little complicated, but how complicated does it get? Just a little bit. So I mean, before I was like, you know, we're just gonna let sub D just handle things. You know, that was the initial strategy. But by this point, we have lost that plot. We're now thinking sub D can't be trusted. We gotta whack them. I'm sorry, some of these jokes are just too raw for Blender tutorials, definitely. You know, who knows how long these videos will be up. YouTube might take me out for polygon bullying. I mean, I'm especially bullying sub D right now, and my goal was to not bully sub D this video, but it's just so easy and also so necessary. Like, sub D, I'm telling you, is such a jerk. So we are just kind of trying to resolve some things. It looks like we're gonna have to carry our try all the way to the next flat junction area, or the next flat area, which is here, and then from there we don't have to see it anymore. So triangles, also being a Terminator, can sometimes have some issues whenever it comes to, God, this top curvature area is actually so relaxed, and our geo is actually very tight. So on the last part that I posted, that's a time lapse right now on this channel, I don't know if anyone noticed, but I accidentally made a mistake where I worked the edges way too tight, because it was just late and just speed run, longest recordings ever. I should stop this, but I had the loops too tight, and because of that the perimeter was way too tight, and that impacted the result. But let's just continue on with this model. You know, sometimes the hardest part with the model is continuing on whenever you know you lost, but also you know, you never know when you've truly lost on a model. Like you know, some of my favorite robots are from situations that were questionable. Like, I mean, anytime I sculpt a bot, I'm like, I don't know about this, which is why it's so easy to give away a sculpt, or I mean, not give away a sculpt, just throw away a sculpt, not give away some trash. But instead, the process of just refining it to perfection is a study on its own and worth pursuing. You know, not to even start talking about sculpt stuff, but it's the same thing with what we're looking at right now. Like, you know, I always talk about the little confidence meter in my head that just goes up and down based on certain factors while modeling. And right now I'm like, you know, I should make a visual of it so you guys can really get in the same headspace as me, that insane headspace. So we're just shuffling around, moving geo, just thinking stuff and things. You know, let's right click, add an additional loop, and all that these loops do is alleviate the flow, because the flow is just so skewed on the geometry. We're getting such hard flows. You know, I see like this tension on the mesh, and so that's going to affect like the directional solving of subdivision. Here I am just talking more about just my impression of subdivision, but I feel like if everybody you talk to would have like a different type of relationship with it. Like, I'm pretty sure most people have a more normal relationship with sub-D than me. But me, I'm dominated by the need to subjugate it when it comes to sub-D. Because sub-D is just a jerk. But letting it have its way all the time is just terrible. You know, every time I do something, I just get in and I just work it a little bit more. Just test the boundaries. You know, I definitely know I discussed that multiple times, where I'm telling you guys, like, in all these videos, I'm like prototyping solutions. Like, every video is like a different type of solution that I'm thinking of and trying, because, you know, the perfect answer is never the one that's being shown. There's always a more efficient way. You know, like, I wish these were set up in a more speed-runny way, because then we could have summoning salt do content covering it, but also the ability of irrational individuals to dedicate inordinate amounts of time to optimizations of what I deem to be unimportant things is just so irrational. Like, I watch these videos of people just, you know, beating level 4-2 on Mario 2 using techniques that they discovered via task assisted speedrun in order to basically solve problems of resulting in something called wrong warping, which is just the craziest thing in Mario 1. Like, you know, you think you beat Mario 1. God, this part is just a demon. It's a demon part. I mean, and really, I don't even know where these things are. I mean, I assume they're like near the bottom, but here's a picture of it sticking out of the side. So, like I said, every image tells the truth, and then it also tells a lie. Like, this one makes it look like it's all the way at the back. This one makes it look like it's like kind of at the side. And the longer you look at these images, the more you lose your mind. So we're just going to trust that one. But I'm really obsessed with this area. Like, that's the reason that I wanted to practice it first, was to really just ensure that a good solution was found. So I'm just looking at this, and we're just going to do something I didn't think I would be doing today. and that is going into sculpt mode and grabbing my boy grab, which we're just going to try to get a little artistic with it. You know, risky business, I know. We have a possibility of it all coming apart, but we also have a possibility of it looking more like our image. So, you know, take your pick. Which one do you want to do? Do you want to risk it all? Try to be a poly modeler? Do you want to get in here and sculpt and also move the cursor with your mouse? Because whenever I'm modeling, I will integrate sculpting, but I'll be a mouse sculptor. So I don't know why I would do such things, but you know, just over time, just becoming so acquainted with Blender, just sculpt's just a part of my Blender experience now. Like, if you need to relax some geometry, what are you gonna do? You have like 5 choices, right? You could go in Loop Tools and do it. You could, man, was there? No, there's another way to right click. Here we go. Right click has an option for smoothing, but you know, I've never messed with that thing. Like, you know, I'm afraid to talk smack about it because anytime I do, someone will show me to be a fool. But I never use that one, smooth vertices. I mean, maybe I should. Maybe we should give it a shot today. And the only reason we're solving this geometry is because it just improves the shading result somewhat, just to get things a little bit more clear. And also, I'm still pondering in my head, I'm like, should we apply level and then start smoothing? Also, that was the answer for the edges being too close on the previous time lapse that was uploaded. Because the edges were so close, I was able to use the smooth modifier to basically get it back under control. So it was actually a really dreamy process. Like, I was like, ooh, smooth. You are so smooth. Let's add an edge here, but we're going to terminate it short, which anytime I say that, I just imagine I'm like cutting the ankles of it. Just cutting those ankles. And we're going to remove that one and just really analyze what we want with our flow, because our flow matters. The geometry shouldn't be telling me what to do. Alright? That's just not going to fly. This edge, is it needed? Is it needed? Is it needed? So if I ask 5 times, the topo version of Candyman will appear. And does that edge loop need to exist? That extra edge loop, does that extra edge loop need to exist? This edge loop, are we going to dare call it extra? That's what it's wondering. It's like, are you going to call me extra? You know, yes. So we are going to do what's called a reduction. So we're just removing that loop and we'll let it be a try. I mean, we could always come back, diamond quad it, but that's pretty much what it's going to turn into. However, I don't even like that solution. In fact, I don't even like the solution of just going all the way there. Let's really just think about what we're going with. I'm telling you, there's such a difference, I feel, in the content I do between the ones that are actually rehearsed and the ones that are just done off the cuff. So, not saying that you'll get more stuff that's randomly done off the cuff, but so dangerous. You know, this is how I end up with B-side recordings, is I start recording some stuff without rehearsal and just start messing up and end up with an unsatisfactory result. However, I'm a gambling man, you guys. I'm a gambling man. I'll keep going all in over and over and over, which is one of the benefits you can expect with your purchase of our tools, is that I will definitely be reinvesting it into the actual product itself and its growth, because I sincerely believe in its future. And also, I need it to be of a certain level. A level is not it yet, but it's definitely getting there. You know, one day you'll be hearing an announcement that the tool is done. It's just done. Not finished, just done. Like we're done. Like we've, you know, it's not supposed to be this thing that we add on to forever, because I mean theoretically that would result in an add-on that would be unable to be loaded. So at least I'm not trying to become that sort of add-on, just an add-on that's unable to be loaded. We don't want to be an add-on with system requirements, of course, but there's definitely an end in sight. But I feel that everything must be polished to a rather clean point before getting there. So with every unification, just know that we are getting closer to it. But the goal is to definitely make everything have a sort of continuity to it on everything, across everything. Like, you know, I look at Retopo Flow. I'm not saying I want that exact type of experience, but when I loaded Retopo Flow recently, I was like, Jesus, this thing's like an OS. Oh man, they got their own splash screen. They're like, man, I mean, I'm not saying we're going to do all that, but I feel that they definitely have a finished look to it. I love them. They do good work. So let's just slide this on and just slide this out, slide it back. We'll grab this, slide it, press E in order to match it to the other side, F in order to flip it, just to really keep it congruent. And we're just thinking about how close do we actually need it, because if we have it too close, we're going to smooth too much whenever we sub deep. But basically, this is what our part is looking like right now. So I'm just really stepping around it and just thinking, you know, what else can I hit to improve this? I mean, really, I feel that this area comes out too, which is what results in kind of a more interesting hit with this area. So if we do that, one of our loops is going to need to be a reinforcement for that, and this loop is also going to require reinforcement. So we could just select this whole loop, Control B bevel, dissolve this edge, and we get something like that. And this is a good time that we could start using some of the tools to maintain planarization, but I'm just so doubtful of that particular decision that we just made, because it just doesn't look very good on the subdivision side. Like, sometimes I gotta ponder if I should accept mission failure for it, for a particular area. Yeah, I definitely have had my share of jobs where I had to ponder, like, I wonder if I could just pretend I didn't see that, you know. Just, I didn't see that. Sometimes you just gotta so maybe something like that. Really looking at this Ryobi one, not trying to get distracted by some of the subtle changes between that and the Honda one. With this piece, I see more of a kind of ascent, or, you know, yeah, ascent whenever it comes to this particular wedge. So let's dissolve that to maybe get something like that, and let's slide this all the way up to here. We can't slide that one all the way up to here, but we can definitely slide that one all the way up to here. And we're just going for something a little more immediate when it comes to this. It may or may not work. We're just testing it out. And the beginning of it is also very clear cut. So that means we'll have to grab all of these edges and just press Control B in order to bevel it, giving us something like that. So just making sure there's no shading artifacts. If we're going to be modeling like this, then there definitely shouldn't be any normal related fatalities. So at this area, it's also a curiosity. And by curiosity, I mean we're going to slide it, press E, F in order to set it to the opposite. something like that. And let's detach it from the junction or the perimeter protection and actually connect it to the area below. So if we press Alt V, we can look at our wireframe of what our shape looks like so far with what we're creating. I mean, obviously we can turn that into a redirect, and we can get in here as well just to make sure everything's copacetic and everything's looking good, just because this area is just looking a little bit questionable. And for questionable areas, because of whatever mental defect that makes me use Blender, I am going to press I and then B. I always joke that you know, you got to be mental to use Blender, because everybody I ever talk to is like, yo, I'm mental. I'm like, okay, thank you. Thank you for that information. But you know, Blender's a Blender's a mental hospital of a program. It's a curiosity for sure. So we are just moving pieces around and just really looking at this, and I feel that there's more of a kind of wedge happening with theirs that isn't happening with mine. So how could we make this modification in a unified fashion? Because if we try to sculpt it, it's just going to be a nightmare. So you know my answer. Q, add modifier, lattice. And lattice is just a classic for me. Find the right axis first though. So first we'll put some spans on the X, and we're just sliding these in, maybe something like that. We don't want to get too overzealous with it because we do have a pretty advanced solution here, but lattices have saved me more times than they've ever hurt me. In fact, I can't think of any time that a lattice has ever hurt me, because they're so non-destructive, you can just remove it whenever it doesn't work out. So, I mean, even on human studies, I would use lattices to just be kind of interactive undo steps that I would just test to try to refine a solution to perfection. So, you know, really just working at angle. I really feel like this particular version that I'm doing is more of a stylized version, kind of a just more of an attempt on this tank than it is the actual accurate result. But you know, it is a gamble. So we press Q and Y in order to add a few more loops. Let's actually add one loop, and we see that actually changes the form quite a bit. So let's add one more, which also changes the form quite a bit. And we could also lower the amount of impact we're having, but we're just seeing what our changes are that we're having with this shape. And now with more spans, we can actually get far more intimate with our lattice, because we were just kind of moving it on a whole, and really we need to be fairly precise with it. Like, I could bring this image into the 3D view and use this as my reference, but we're eyeballing it today. It's my favorite way to deal with the ref, via my eyeballs. So let's grab these, move this up, just really looking at the ref and just kind of thinking, this part is a pain. You know, I'd sure like to talk to whoever put these parts together. Like, what is all this? What's up with this? What's up with that? What's up with that? Ryobi's like, we're going to make a part that's impossible to clone. However, that's impossible to say because, you know, as with everything, it gets cloned. We see the Honda one on the same plate, so they obviously made their replacements for it. They needed to get in the game. Commercialization is inevitable. So let's take a look at our piece so far. We've been working on this for about 52 minutes, really being quite obsessive with it as far as the shape, the spaces that we're giving everything for these bevels. Also, we have two race dogs running here. And what I mean by that is We have two sets of bevels, two sets of tries, which means that they can definitely become quads. They can get it. And my background just changed, choking my computer out mercilessly. Let's go into wireframe, and I'm just going to tab, and we are going to just grab this area and bring it down. Really don't know how tall that is, but we're trying our best here. And I almost want to grab this and just pop it out, but I just don't see that indicated in the images anywhere. So I guess the next thing is, let us progress this to the next level. So we'll just Shift D duplicate, we will hide it, and then with this version we are going to apply the lattice and keep everything else. And so let's just put this giant circle on it and throw in the towel on this thing, because we could keep terrorizing ourselves with the geometry of the tank all day, and we probably will. I will. I'll be up late night pondering it. My girlfriend will be sitting there disappointed, wondering why I never came to bed, and it'll be because I'm in here looking at naked tanks on the internet, just looking at tanks without their papers on and with no labels. I don't care who made this tank. That's how I'm trying to think of the right word. God, there is no right word. There's only wrong words. Alright, so we'll just continue. No need to find the right word for such a situation. And let us just apply that. And I'm going to add in a cylinder. And how many rounds of cylinder do you want to get shot in the face with? We usually go with 32, but today I'm just going to go with 24. 24 rounds of Howdy Doody. And we're looking at this circle and how it's integrated. And, I could tell that it's integrated in a really hardcore way with this back. It doesn't even go all the way down. It like stops here where the legs kind of come out. So, like I said, this is more of a somewhat stylized approach to modeling this part, which is what you say whenever you're, what's the right word? Fucking up. So let's S, Shift, and Z. Just really looking at these images, trying to think about how big this hole is. You can't go asking a tank how big is your hole. That's how you get canceled in the world of big tank, which is what we call it. So even though this mesh is a subdivision mesh, we are going to just union it, which looks terrible, or it looks good when you add it secondarily, but if you add it primarily, it looks like that. So before we actually apply it, let's see if we can assist ourselves topologically with our merge, because whatever we do to this shape, it will happen to the main shape. So we're just going to tighten that circle up like that, because it's really not that wide at all. And we're also going to grab this area and do the same thing. We're just going to bevel it with a perimeter protection bevel, just because I do see it kind of penetrating in the back. But I don't, I see that this is going to be a bit of a pain. Sometimes I look at a shape and I just don't know what shape I'm looking at. I'm like, what is that? That shape is undefined. So if you're going to ride me for accuracy, you're going to have to draw it out like a fourth grader and say exactly what trapezoid, cube, and squares are connected to form that particular shape in that area. But, sometimes I'll just stare at an image. Like I said, I never take victory laps. I'm always kicking myself even after the upload, feeling like a failure. So I'll probably be looking at this as well, just thinking, I could have done better, man. Why didn't I save Robin? Why does this mesh have to come back as Red Hood? And this area is so important to another area that we're gonna have to create a counterflow to make this happen. And we duplicated some meshes and hid them because there's certain steps that I plan to come back and investigate later And today's video, I didn't even get sidetracked because I've been on a video kick lately. Like if you bought the robot course, I recently added like another 5-hour video to that, just of me mauling the piece from the upload, which is a limited time exclusive to that course. But you know, I got a lot of points off my chest. You know, I told y'all about how Goku pretty much caused the Tournament of Power and is an idiot, and you know, it just came out that Vegeta got beat up by Granola. So, you know, the manga's kind of a torture. I mean, not even the manga, just the plot of Dragon Ball in general is a bit of a torture. Like if you're a true fan, you're used to Vegeta being second fiddle and also being played like a fiddle. Like literally, like the enemies will grab him and strum him like a banjo, and he will play tunes and squeak. Goku also squeaks, but that's only if you're watching the Team 4-Star edition, which I'm a big fan of. Team 4-Star. I was quite sad to see it go because I wanted to see him get to the end. Like Boo offered a lot of comedic potential, and so, you know, worst part about Team 4-Star's departure was, at least to me, was the imitations that tried to pop up that were trying to continue it that just weren't authentic. So you'd see these like just god awful dubs. It's like, oh, this is not those guys that we've known and loved for years. So really cutting on blind faith here. Like if you're a beginner to Blender, while you should probably understand working like this, you probably shouldn't work like this. You know, the phase of dancing around your block in, really just getting intimate with your block in phase and getting the mesh exactly as you want before you start committing is really essential. I mean, right now we're approaching this just with general modeling, but I'm pretty sure we could also approach this with other techniques for varying effect. Like we could have approached it with booleans and using inset, but I just didn't feel like going that route today. I felt like testing sub D, which sub D ended up testing me. So let us continue just looking at these areas and just thinking real hard. You know, always thinking. We'll press J to connect, J to connect, J to connect, and maybe something like that. However, I do not like that, and I don't like that I created it there, and I don't like that it even exists. So we look at this loop and we're like, what are we fighting to protect? Why are we protecting that? Why are we protecting that? You know, thus that loop was deemed unworthy to even exist. And, you know, while that's hard to basically assign that status to a loop, you know, so harsh, you aren't worth living, loop. It's worthy. I mean, it's worthwhile. Sorry, getting lost in thought here. So we're just going to bring all this out and just really offset our problem. And I've just been looking at this thinking, how am I going to solve this? And so the best solution I could come up with is this. You know, I know, not the best, maybe not even what you would have done, but it is definitely what I would have done. And by I would have done, I just done it, so I did it. And that means I just did it. So we are done. So with these, we can talk about reduction. However, I'm gonna reduce it one street down. You know, I try not to have hardcore reductions happen on transitions. Like right now, we have this whole loop kind of being a transition loop. I mean, really a bad job at it, and we still did it. We need to slide this loop in and this loop in, and then we can dissolve that. And so now we have it one away from basically our junction transition area. So we're just sliding out, just bringing some pieces out, just thinking about how we want to do this. You know, as you start getting more complex, you see that the topology solutions that I'm using just really loosen up. You know, first we could go for like an all quad formation, but by the end, it's not even worth it. In the end, it's about surviving subdivision, which, what does that even mean at this point? What is the goal? How do we know what success is when the part is just so difficult to understand? So it looks like it has a lip on it, so we'll just scale one in there and slide this up. And that's the hard part with images. Images and their victory criteria is, does it look like image? Yes or no. It's freaking cruel. So let's press E and Z. And one of these feels like it's just too big. I mean, we're really just going all out with what we're putting on the inside of this, even though this thing needs to be empty, just like that. And let's just grab all of these loops, and we're just going to give them a little sub-D reinforcement so we don't have to revisit them with creases. So maybe something like that. Let's delete that. And so this is what we're looking at so far. So let's add a layer of subdivision, Alt V, wireframe, and then we just hit it with an auto smooth and just look at what we're dealing with so far with this piece. So obviously we could be working on this all day, and looks like at this rate we're going to be, because of the stipulation for modeling this month, which is using subdivision. Subdivision, I'm telling you, is so cruel. You know, if you catch me loving subdivision, I might be lying to you. But I'm telling you, we have an understanding. That understanding is don't use subdivision. So let us clean the mesh, and we'll just give it one loop so that way we can maintain what we have. And I'm just looking at all these various images of this piece, and it's just impossible to tell what piece this is. Like, I'm going to be obsessively looking at pictures of pressure washers, which is something that, man, I'm telling you, all the best jokes you guys can't even say anymore, or at all. I don't think they were ever good to appropriate to begin with. You know, people probably shouldn't have been making such jokes. But I'm telling you, I came from a strange town in a strange place. People would just be making the most inappropriate jokes all the time. It was just a part of life. So we're going to use a little box cutter for the first time in a long time. And we're just going to cut a box, bevel, and let's give it 3 sections and just apply. And before applying that, I'm going to just use knife and just cut a shape, and then from here we can just apply it. And because everything's all nice with that guidance edge, we can actually grab this loop on the inside. But yeah, all the best jokes can't be made anymore. So, but anyways, back to what I was saying. So I'm gonna be looking at pictures of pressure washers all night to get to the bottom of these mysteries. So we're just looking at this shape and determining a strategic path for getting this to a conclusion. So maybe something like that. I know, really extreme, right? We'll grab this whole area and just scale it in, or even dissolve it, so we end up with something like that. And the goal is to give the boundary enough room to subdivide a lot, and give the rest of it enough room to still smooth out as well. Alright, just bringing in these loops. Just a silent game of add the loop, hide the loop, deal with the loop. You know, everybody loops, we all loop. Just looping it up. And, you know, we don't need Boxcutter at this very moment, interfering with our click and drag, which sometimes I do because I don't know. I just don't know anymore. And we're just solving this before we even union it to the shape. And I'm not even completely sure where it goes, which kind of enrages me. You know, I should have probably solved that mystery. That's probably why I was staring at the image so long. And also why I despise images. I mean, images are just a part of life though. But really, I save all that stuff for client work. It's just lately, this is just part of an event. But I don't know, there's some themes of it that might continue afterwards, who knows. So we look at the top looks great. The bottom, well, the bottomed out. You know, bottom is a mess. You know, can't stop trying to make inappropriate jokes. I'm telling you guys, I was suspended from school for that stuff when I was a kid. They're like, what'd you just say? Man, I'd be suspended so fast. But you're suspended. Alright. Go home and play some, is this thing mirrored? Okay, this thing is mirrored, but it's mirrored like incorrectly. So we need our empty back. And I'm going to select empty from the outliner. And let's add a layer of subdivision to it. So that's what we're looking at. So we're probably going to need at least one layer of one additional loop to hold it down. In fact, we're going to need like 2 loops. Let's apply solidify and get in here and add a loop here, add a loop here, add a loop here, add a loop here. And do we even know what our Z is? So let's remirror it on the Z. Shout out to Mesh Machine, still being my default right now. And let's now union this together. And you know, as usual, we got to always check for howdy doody, which is the term I use for bunch of bull. You know, sometimes you just get a bunch of bull going on with these meshes. I mean, besides the bulls that we just added. But let's make sure subdivision isn't showing in edit mode like ever. And what I want to do is grab this entire section of the mesh, maybe from here to here. We press V, rip it, and it almost works. We almost got away with it, except we don't get to just work like that. We don't get to just rip out an entire section that way. Instead, we got to select it like this, press P, separate the selection, and then from here, we can actually, first of all, delete half of it. And we'll just solve this side and then replace the other side with it, because doing all this work in triplicate, definitely not my idea of fun time on a Friday night. And it's not even Friday, it's Thursday, so we really gotta get moving. And you know, as I look at this, I'm like thinking, man, I made a mistake. But we're gonna roll with it. You know, mistakes happen, but we're gonna get this to an acceptable conclusion. Maybe. We got a lot of near misses in here. I mean, really, we could do something like that to really clean it up, but our rules are very specific for this scenario that we're in right now, where we can't basically merge any perimeter elements or add any additional geometry. All we can do is just slide and negotiate and worry about what we currently already have. So that is the strategy right now, is just keep everything the same with everything that's going all the way around, so that way we can have a perfect merge with the other side. And usually with these kind of brain surgery type mesh situations, I just get in and deal with it fast. That's like my only hope, is to just do it fast, because if you do it slow, if you take a break, if you pause and you're like, I'm gonna do it tomorrow, well, if you forget what you were doing or what part you were like in the process of, then time will be wasted. This loop, we're not going to use that loop anymore. We're not going to talk about that loop anymore. Just kidding. But we aren't going to talk about that loop anymore. So just really analyzing what we have going on. I mean, I know this isn't the best, but you know, this thing literally got merged in like 5 minutes ago. Maybe not even 5 minutes, maybe like 3 or 4 minutes, but now it's being welcomed into the family with open arms, as if this thing's part of the family line of house soap dispenser or whatever this thing is. So let us just slide. We're dissolving something like this, and on this side we will do the same thing. So with this particular area, I just wonder if there's more that can be done on a subdivision level. So let's grab this edge all the way to this edge, and we could just Control B bevel just to give that area a hit. And because of that hit, we can actually add a loop to reinforce this particular corner, which is also of high value importance. And we can just send this over to here topologically. And so let's take a look at what we have so far. So we want to mirror this across the empty. So let's just modify our mirror, use the eyedropper and select empty, which will get us somewhere about here. And let's just apply the mirror, grab these two, join, and then select everything and choose merge vertices by distance and hope for the best. Let's select everything, shift tilde. This is the only area with a hole. So now we have basically survived this process of modeling this really ambiguous, mysterious. I mean, I'm going to be pondering this piece for quite a while, but now we've gotten in and was able to complete the construction of it and still retain fairly good topology. And I'm sure that with a little bit of polishing with the sculpt brushes, we could actually get this to an even finer amount, and then by bringing in some of these images, we could actually make it adhere a lot more intimately with our reference images. But with that, we'll at least stop at this point, and I thank everyone for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.